welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today's episode is all about how do you keep track of time when you're with your clients. So this is something that I know wasn't discussed in my program like a lot of the other things I do in these episodes. But this is something that's actually really, really important. And a lot of times you don't know that you need these tips until it's too late. So maybe you've already run over some sessions with clients, or you have had some clients that were really talkative and it was awkward for you to figure out when or how to cut them off because you have someone else waiting for you, or it's the end of the day, or whatever the situation is. And it's just a really tough subject to figure out sometimes. And so I really want today's episode to give you some tips that you can walk away from and actually do to make sure that you are sticking with those time boundaries. So I know it is a joke that's in a ton of memes about, person unloads their trauma and the therapist is like, well, our 15-minute session's up. Thanks. Bye. See you next week. And most of us aren't that cold. But I think sometimes people may forget that they aren't the only one that we have that day. And there's a lot that comes with being a therapist where we really need to stick with our boundaries to model that for other people. So with the therapy space, time is really important, not only because of the session that we have, right? Like we're allotted this amount of time with this client. But it's important for multiple things, right? Like it helps us structure the session. So okay, if I have 50 minutes with this person, I'm going to spend the first 5 talking about, how they're doing today and what's going on. You might spend the next few minutes after that discussing what's happened between the last session and now. And then you may talk to them about like what their goal is for the session or what specifically they want to talk about or whatever else. And then you take that for the remainder of the session. And then you want to spend the last couple minutes wrapping up. Or I know some therapists don't give their clients set time slots. So you're going to need those last couple minutes to schedule the next appointment or collect payment or do whatever other get information if you're trying to have them like sign a release of information to talk to somebody else or, just whatever. There's a million different things that you could do, but you want the last 5 minutes to be wrapping up and taking care of whatever loose ends that you have when it comes to scheduling or some of the other things that I mentioned. So we all sort of have a general rhythm to our sessions. And if you're very new to therapy as a therapist, you're going to develop this rhythm over time, but it's nice to sort of have a general framework of what I just described. The first few minutes is this, and then this, and then that. So you have something to go off of. You can change yours around, alter it, specialize whatever you need to over time, because I know depending on the modality you use, if you use something like EMDR, you're going to really need to structure your sessions so you have that time at the end to use like a container or use some kind of exercise so the client isn't walking out really activated. So time is super important. Another thing that I hinted at a minute ago is the time we have the session, when we start and when we end, really sets boundaries for the client in a way that maybe they're not the best with setting boundaries, so we're modeling that for them, or other people haven't really set healthy boundaries with them, so they're getting to experience that through this lens. And it's just something we have to do. So even if at some point you're like, oh, I feel really bad, I had to, tell them that it was the end of the session, I had to walk them out. It's like, well, we have this allotted time. So if you are sticking with that boundary, that's really good behavior to be modeling overall. Another thing is, if you are sticking with the time boundaries with your client you have this hour, that means you're also respecting the client you have next hour by not being late for that session. It is so easy to have almost like a domino effect. You're running over with the first person, so then now you're 5 minutes late to the next session, and then you feel bad that 5 minutes was taken up, so then you kind of let this person talk a little bit longer, and now they run over. Or maybe they end on time, but you need to go to the bathroom. You need to get a snack. whatever else. There's like this email you have to send. And so now you're a couple minutes late for the next person, and it just can keep going. So, and then also that first person that you let run over, they're going to think, well, I could do it again next time. So you just, yeah, time's important all the way around for us and for the clients. So, you know, it helps us stay on task with some of our self-care type things too. I know some people say like, well, I didn't mind if they ran over a lot because I had lunch right after. It's like, yeah, but now you just cut yourself off from your break. So how is that really helping your next few clients? You know, and one or two times, like I get it. Sometimes somebody's in a crisis or there's a situation going on and you have to run over, or you have to, you know, it takes a couple extra minutes, or you forgot to do something, you forgot to have them sign their yearly paperwork at the beginning of the session, so you got to get that done at the end. And that's okay with like one-offs, but for the most part you need to remain like really consistent with the time boundaries. So it can be difficult to stay within the hour. You can feel really guilty, like I said, especially if the client's very emotional or they're opening up about something, or you get one of those doorknob confessions where the person's like about to leave. There's like 5-10 minutes left of the session and they're like, I'm going to tell you something I've never told anybody else. And you're like, oh God, we don't have a lot of time. So there's lots of different things that can keep you in a space where you want to run over the time. And hopefully these next few tips I'm going to go over will help you with that. So the first one is clocks everywhere. If you're in person, make sure you have at least 2 clocks in the room. You have one that you can see and you have one that the client can see. I've heard of some therapists getting like a digital clock and they put it under the couch of where the client's sitting so they can kind of like glance down and see it. There's some people who will position a clock on like the end table where the client's sitting, where maybe like tissues or something are. And you want to make sure that the clock that the client sees is in their line of sight. Sometimes like, yeah, you can have a regular clock, but honestly, I kind of feel like at this point, digital is like just a quicker, easy read for a lot of people. So especially if you're seeing younger clients, that's just like quick and easy. So maybe get a digital clock that they can see so they can quickly like be aware of the time. If you are virtual, you make sure you've got the clocks. So I have my computer clock in the corner, and then I have a small clock here on the side. So I've got in both like lines of sight, I guess. Both eyes can kind of catch whichever clock is more convenient to me at the time, and I'm consistently aware of what time it is. Another kind of tip over time is like, as you do this for a while, you'll automatically know when it's starting to get closer to the end of the session. And it'll be a rhythm that you're like, okay, I know I'm already like, I got like 30 minutes left. And then you'll look and you'll have about 30 minutes left. So certain things just come with time, but you want to set yourself up in the best way possible to start out with. So make sure clients can see the time, make sure you can see the time, and it's all easily accessible, because that is going to help, especially if you end up with this next tip I was going to say. If you are queuing the client, if you're like, so with the last 10 minutes we have, anytime I've said that, I see them look at the time. And so then they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And you just right then and there set a boundary of, we've got 10 minutes to finish up the session. So, and that helps them, because some clients will go, okay, I have like 3 minutes left. And so I see them like, look at the time. Okay, I got 3 minutes left. Okay, let me tell you the same really quick. And so they get used to it as well, because now you've clocked the time, literally, but you're sharing the time with them. And so then they become more mindful of, this is the time and space that I have. Let me make the most of it. So sometimes if you find that a story is kind of dragging on and you can tell that the client got lost in the details versus telling you maybe more about the feelings. So you could be like, hey, so, you know, I don't want to interrupt you, but I really want to know what happened and how it affected you. So with these last like 15 minutes or so, maybe explain to me less of what happened and a little bit more about what impact it had on you, and redirect them, pull them back in. Because sometimes, yeah, those details become a lot. And then you're like, I really didn't need to spend that extra 10 minutes with them hearing about this person's backstory to the backstory when I could just hear like what actually went down and why it's bothering them. So yeah, be able to like tell the client what time it is. Also, like most boundaries, you want to set them as early in the relationship as possible. So if you have your own practice on your website, on any directories that you use, in your paperwork, make sure that you are putting what that time is. So for some people, they do a 50-minute like clinical hour. If you take insurance, you're going to want and probably need a lot of the time more than that. And so with insurance, you have to do at least 53 minutes in order for it to be considered an hour. So for that to be the case, you need a 55-minute session potentially, right? So then you've got that last 5 minutes to do the note, go to the bathroom, whatever, eat a snack, fill your water cup, whatever. So, make sure that from the console, on your paperwork, on websites, on directories, in the intake, like all of the places, you are repeating how much that session is. So if you do a 45-minute session, then you let them know, like, our sessions will be 45 minutes. And if you feel the need to, you can explain why. I feel like 45 minutes is the time that works the best for me. We can get a lot done in that time. If you're aware of how much time that we have, then you can go ahead and plan accordingly. And so you let the client know and be transparent about it. And that's going to cover you, and that's going to help you later on when you reference like, well, since we have 45-minute sessions, I want us to do this. Or since we have 55-minute sessions, and we're on the last 5, let's make sure that we can wrap it up so you aren't left hanging. There's so many different ways of going about it, but you definitely want to make sure that you are including the time somewhere in there. Like letting them know what that boundary is before you even really start. And sometimes you kind of have to during. So if you notice that a client, they were cool with the 50-minute session, but now it's been a couple months and they're stretching it to like 52, 53, and next thing you know, they're like, oh, okay, I have 2 minutes left. And it's like 58 minutes in, and you're like, how did we then move to the hour? Well, you might have been the one to let that slide too many times, and now they think they have the full hour. So whether they forgot or they kind of needed it or they realized that you could accommodate it, it just happens. So you're definitely going to revisit that every once in a while. Like, oh, since I know we do the 50-minute sessions, and then just like use it as a reference point. Another thing that I've personally done with clients that I know have either a lot going on or I feel like they really maybe do get lost in the details, or sometimes some people who are just a little more type A and they like this. I tell clients a lot of the times, if you can, take notes between sessions. I don't care if it's in the notes app of your phone and you just got a couple bullet points, or if it's like long, detailed things that you're like, I need to make sure I cover this and this time and this date and this thing, whatever it is. But for clients that I know fit that criteria, I'll ask them to try to take notes in between sessions so that we can make the most of our time. So we're 2 minutes in. Hey, how are you? How's your day going? Great. So what do you want to talk about? I am always like, what's on the list today? So we can just jump right in, and they come in with an organized plan of what it is that they want to talk about. And I've found, obviously this won't work for every client, but since I see clients with high functioning anxiety, I feel like a lot of them are ready or anxious and overthinking about all the things that are going on. So it kind of helps them actually to have a list that they put together. And it helps us structure the session as well, because now they've structured it because they've decided what was the most important thing to talk about. So then it kicks back to me to be able to make sure that they're staying on task. So sometimes that's, you running through and going, okay, well, I know we have another 10 more minutes left. So is there anything else that's left on the list, or what's the most important thing that's left on the list that you really needed to talk about today? And so, yeah, that's something else that I think has been really helpful for the client. And honestly, it's been helpful for me too, because then I'm not searching for what is it that they want to talk about today? What is going on in their lives? Let me ask about different categories. If the clients come in and they're ready to go, I'm like, yes, okay. You've decided what the things were you needed to talk about, and let's go. And just jump in. So you may find that works really well too. Another thing is, if you've got a client, another tip, if you've got a client that is a talker, and they push the limits of the sessions. Maybe you've let them slide a couple times. Maybe you have run over. Maybe there's been, I don't know, just too many situations where you're like, oh my gosh, I was 2 minutes late for my next client, or I didn't get to go to the bathroom because now like I was rushing because of whatever. I had a meeting or whatever, anything that's going on. If you already know, like, this client is one that definitely pushes those limits, and I've told them the time and they see the clock and none of that's really working, your best bet is to be blunt. I mean, I know I've had to do this. At the start of the session, say, hey, I've noticed that we've gone over a couple times and I see another client right after you and I really don't want to cut into their time, just like I wouldn't want to cut into yours. So we have to end at 55 minutes. Or we have to end on time, and emphasize that. And then you are again resetting the boundary. You are enforcing that this is now kind of disrespectful to the next person, and here's how it would feel to you. So let's make sure that we are respectful of our time and the next person's time. And usually that works really well, actually. So that's what I would absolutely recommend. Depending on the person, you may need to reiterate that one a couple times. Usually it's not a one and done for people, especially if they've had like a big crisis or a lot going on, or it's been like, I don't know, like now with some of the holidays that just passed, people that I might see every other week, it's been a month since I've seen them because they were out of town, or they were on vacation, they were, I was off for the holidays. So, then that's a month's worth of information when we're used to talking every 2 weeks. So they may, need more of that time, they feel like, but it's like, okay, then how do we maximize the time? Because you can't really get more of the time in this hour. So yeah, I think if somebody persists with continuing to push those boundaries after you've done some of those tips I've mentioned, that's where you've just got to be, like I said, not just blunt, but set up some consequences. Like, hey, I've noticed that, I've told you the time we have, I've tried to redirect, I've done a couple different things, and it seems like you're still going over the time, and I want to respect your time, but at the same time, I need you to respect mine and the next client's, or and my lunch break. So we have to end on time today, and if we're finding that that's not working, then you may either need a therapist who provides longer sessions, or you may need to meet with somebody who can meet with you a couple times a week potentially, or you may need to come in with that list so that you can better organize like how to use this time in the best way possible. So I've rarely seen it come to that, but there's always somebody that's you're gonna need that with. So have that in mind too. It can be a really awkward conversation. It can be really tough. It can feel kind of mean. You might get called mean or uncaring, but we all have a schedule that we have to maintain. So it's just part of the deal. It's interesting too, because I don't think that this happens as often in other fields. Most people get like 10, 15 minutes with their primary care doctor, and I don't agree with that at all, but it's kind of the way that system works. So you can't keep that person longer. And I mean, even if people complain, it's not in the same way that sometimes it feels like they do with therapy. I think because we're supposed to be there and care, and we do, but we also care about those boundaries, and we also care about the next client, and we also care about going to the bathroom like some of the things we need to do for us too. So it's a whole process. But if you feel guilty about cutting off a session and the person's really emotional, something else that you can do, kind of my final tip, I guess, would be if you have to cut off, just say, hey, I know that this is really heavy and there's a lot going on right now, and I really appreciate how open you've been about your experiences. So to make sure that you're leaving here feeling composed, feeling calmer, feeling more stable, I want to make a note of where we left off, so I know exactly where we can pick up next session. And I want to spend the next couple minutes doing a calming exercise, breathing, grounding, whatever type of thing that might help you and them like close out the session. So then you literally make the note of we left off talking about this year, this time period, this situation, this person, whatever it is. So the client knows, like, you hear them and you respect them, but you also have to end the session. And I think knowing that, them seeing that you are legitimately like taking notes of where you left off, you really do intend to go back to there. And obviously you have to follow through to build that trust. But that, I think, can help them understand more about the time restraints that we've got with this type of job. So it is tough again, and you might find yourself, especially when you're newer and it's harder to set those boundaries with clients, and you really want to make sure clients like you and they understand you and they come back and they feel respected and heard and all of the things. You can feel a little cold or callous, being like, okay, time is up. But that's why we don't say it that way. We say, I want to make sure that we make the most of next time too. Like, let's take some notes so that we're prepared. I want to make sure you leave here feeling calm and stable. Let's take a couple moments to get you back to that space. So, but it is on you. You're the one that needs to be mindful of the time. You're the one that needs to recognize those behavioral patterns. You're the one that needs to end in a way that the client feels safe leaving the office as best you can. So you need to make sure the client feels heard while also making sure that the boundaries are in place. So it's a lot of things to juggle, and I know it might sound like a lot, but if you already have some of those tips in mind, maybe you need to write them down somewhere. Maybe you need to just kind of be ready. And if you're in person too, there may be some of the clients that you have to stand up and walk them to the door because they're still going and time's up. So someone's in the waiting room for you, or you are like dying of thirst and you need to get some more water and your bottle is empty, or you forgot to bring it, or whatever. It's part of the deal. It's what we got to do. So you can be professional, you can be respectful, you can be kind and empathetic, and all the things you're supposed to be as a therapist, and you can also end on time. So I really hope that these tips today set you up. Maybe ease any guilt that you may have about having to stop a session at a point where someone's emotional or stressed out. But I think it's really essential to the work that we do. And the clients ultimately will respect you. The next clients, when they see you're on time, will respect you and know you respect them. And then you can actually take care of yourself those little bits throughout the day if you are ending on time and giving yourself that time to do your note, to do some of the self-care or just bodily things that we got to do out here. So please use some of those tips. Let me know below if there's any tips that you have maybe that you figured out that weren't mentioned today, because I'm all about us all sharing information and helping each other out. So feel free to do that in the comments below. But I hope this was helpful. I hope you all end all your sessions on time and take your entire lunch break and drink all the water and then go to the bathroom and do all the things you're supposed to when you end on time, and all the notes too. So good luck out there. New year, like, let's have some good healthy practices like this. If you want to keep track of what's going on with the episodes, since I tend to post one every week, go ahead and hit subscribe, and then you'll be up to date on everything that we're talking about here next. And if you want to either follow the email list and or join the Facebook group for newer therapists, all those links are below as well. So hopefully I see you all in a couple different places out here. We can all help each other. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.